Welcome to Conversations with Cheryl Weston, and I'm happy to have you with us. Today, I'm really excited about my guests, although I'm usually always excited about most of my guests. That's the reason why I invite them. But today, I am excited because this is about a book, and I was really surprised by the writing of this book and also by the writer. Um, and I think that it is important that more people would write books like this about their life because there's so much more that we don't know about an individual, and when they write it, it becomes more known to us. So today I'm happy to have with me the church monster. Yep. I think that it's important, and you see my guest, which I know that you're surprised that I would be calling him the church mouse. It was kind of unique, and I'm going to ask him how he came up with that name and let you hear that from him. But we have today with us uh, as I said, the church mouse, and AKA, I'm going to call him Dr. Franklin Thompson. And there'll be a couple other more little comical things we can get into about writing his book. And it's called The Confessions of a Murphy's Law Child. Thank you for being on the show today. I appreciate that. Um, so we'll get right into it so that we can take advantage of as much of our time that we have here. Um,
Good morning,
Welcome.
Miss Weston. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Um, as I
Would it,
said, your book was very enlightening, to come from what people know you, and have seen you over the years in different positions. And then to read this book, it's like, let me go back and see who really wrote this book. I didn't know he had it in him, as my grandmother said. You never know what people have got in them. And I will say, it's very well written, and I like the approach and the different aspect, the way you wrote it. Um, as I said, it kept my interest, but it also was so like, oh, made the person like, wow. Um, and what I think too stood out to me, there are so many more like you, so many children that came up this way.
yes,
There are so
yes.
many more, and that's unfortunate. And what I think, when you go back to it, how old are you, if I may ask?
Well, if you don't mind, Miss Weston, could I, so, people, you had mentioned people knowing me and what some know me better than others. So do you mind if I just give a brief
And I'm
bio?
going to let you do that. There's a reason why I'm asking you this question.
Okay.
What's your age?
My
Because you
age,
do put it in the book
in
right
two
now.
and a half months, I will be 70 years old.
And the point that I wanted to stress is he's going to get into is, um, this was written by an individual who is 70 years old now. And unfortunately, the same things that he writes about are happening to the children uh, right now. So, with
That's
all
correct.
of that given, now I'd like to, for those of you, I will let you introduce yourself the way you would like to introduce yourself, and then we can get into some comments and questions about your book.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I am an educator of 46 years. 16 of those years were at the public school, high school level, and then 30 years at UNO. 16 years as a city councilman, 5 years as a director of human rights relations with the mayor of Omaha, 8 years as a family therapist. I'm also a founding member of Omaha Community Council on Racial Justice and Reconciliation. If you don't know that group, that's the group that established the Will Brown Memorial at the courthouse, and also the George Smith Memorial. And then if you go to 24th and Grant Street, you will see the Vivian Strong memorial, and then also a second Vivian Strong memorial at the Great Plains Black Museum. So I was a founding member of the group that put all that together. I'm also a founding member of the fifth of the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Student Social Justice and Racial Justice Competition, which will be coming up next Monday, January the 15th, at the Holland Performing Arts Theater at 5:30. It's a good way to spend Martin Luther King Day. As you mentioned, I'm an author, and I have my first autobiography out. It's part one of a three-part story. And then I have published several music CDs having to do with social justice, race relations, family values, things such as that. And you can get the book and or music by going to Amazon.com or my website, which is Omaha Change Agent, one word, OmahaChangeAgent.com. So that's just kind of a quick summary of who I am. Some people don't only know me in the political realm, but don't know that my background with education is very extensive. And so there are different areas, different layers. And so I'd like to let people know uh, all of those parts.
Thank you very much. As I said, I was totally surprised. What made you write this book?
Um, Basically, uh, most of my life, I have been a person that's been in between worlds, in between the black and white, in between Republican, Democrat, in between um, things. For whatever reason, God in his wisdom has put me through uh, being in dry deserts without a lot of water. So when I was young, I hated it, but now that I'm older, I understand that there was a purpose for that. But basically speaking, I had to overcome racism, I had to overcome poverty, I had to overcome child abuse, and also what I call ask, trick ask ideology.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, I had to find ways to be resilient. So I figured, why just sit on my story? Why not write it so that other young people who are out there can say, hey, here's a guy that went through some things, and instead of going to the dark side, instead of giving up, instead of going to drugs, instead of going to gangs, he decided to fight and overcome, and perhaps that'll inspire some other young people to not give up, not go to the dark side, and to become a conqueror.
When you talked about that trick ask ideology, how would you give a definition of that?
Well, I believe that Black people have been failed not only by one political party, but both political parties. And over the years, because I'm a history teacher, I take a point of view over the last 400 years. I don't start our history at 1960. A lot of my colleagues, they start at 1960, and then that's the beginning of Black history. Well, no, that's not true. Black history started, hundreds of years ago. And so a Republican once came up and asked me, well, why can't the rest of the Blacks in Omaha be like you, or you're one of the good ones? Now, of course, that's a ridiculous statement, but that's an example of a conservative Republican trick ask. Okay. And then at one time, a Democrat came up to me and said, well, why are you so hard on the drug dealers? They didn't bring the dope into America. It's the people with the planes and the boats and whatever. So they're just trying to survive, totally ignoring the fact that they're selling drugs to their own people and
Mhm.
killing their own people. So to me, the world is full of these kind of ridiculous things where people are so down in the weeds, they fail to see the forest because they're looking at one or two trees. There's a bigger message. And the message is that we have been failed by the Republican Party and we have been failed by the Democratic Party.
So that brings out the political side. But if you could had to give it a succinct definition of trick-ass ideology, what would that be? I don't want to give away everything in the book.
Oh, okay. Another example would be back in the 70s when I was in high school. So that dates me. Uh,
Uh-huh.
uh, I was a 4.0 student.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked, well, why are you acting white? How ridiculous.
See,
You
it's
know, black
ridiculous
people,
asked questions.
yeah, black people had the
Mm-hmm.
first legitimate university, uh, University of Timbuktu. We
Mm-hmm.
taught people in England about uh, medical procedures. We were the original educated people. And so a lot of our people don't know their history.
Right.
And so they're asking me why I'm acting white. I'm not acting white, I'm acting very historically black.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've navigated most of my life having to deal with these ridiculous questions that result as that come about as a result of miseducation.
Okay. So I kind of took it as the trick asked questions are ideology, are questions that are ridiculously asked. And I summed it up by ridiculous people because you wouldn't ask a ridiculous question. And I can relate to that's something else that I in the book. I can relate to parts of it because of my background where I went to predominantly white schools um, because my parents were very determined to give their children a better education and opportunity. And so
Yes,
we moved into areas where we were the minority. Therefore, one of the schools that I went to, I did. And I was told sometimes, like, oh, you sound white. In fact, even to this day, I've had people who accuse me, well, you sound like you're white on the phone. Well, what am I supposed to sound like? What would you like for
right,
me to sound like? So I can
right.
relate to some of the things that you said in the book and what you're stating now. One of the questions I'd like to ask you, because as your name, and if people read the book, they'll get, why are you called the church mouse?
Um, During the time that I was raised in terms of values, unfortunately, it was during the time when um, popular society had leaned towards, because of racism,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Black people were taught that they had to be a certain way. And I went to school at Omaha Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And Tech High at that time was the dumping ground school for OPS.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't make it anywhere else, you end up at Tech. And I was at Tech because I was an emancipated youth. I was on my own,
Mm-hmm.
you know, buying my own groceries, paying my own rent, etc. as a senior. And so it was the only school in OPS that would allow me to be there and not have parents. It was really an alternative school.
Mm-hmm.
But that alternative school also meant that the most at risk of all the kids were all there in one setting. So another example was that Tech High was the only school that had special ed. All the special ed was dumped there at that one
Mm-hmm.
school too. So there was a false belief amongst my peers that in order to be a real Black man, you had to be like Superfly, the Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you had to have 3, 4 women. You had to be a player,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you had to not get straight A's and all of that. So I was going to Zion Baptist Church regularly, even though I didn't have to. My parents were in Denver, Colorado. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have to go. They weren't making me go. So the fact that I was using church and religion as part of my resiliency, well, I was acting white. And so church mouse became a put down that I wasn't a real soul brother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I've learned to do over the years, Cheryl, is take all the negatives, take all the lemons in my life and turn them into lemonade. So I rather than be mad about being called a poot butt or a rookie or a church mouse or a white boy, rather than being angry about that, I embraced it and then I used it to advance myself.
You use a lot of names such as Crazy Beulah, Big Daddy, Banana Babe, Church Mouse. And that's something that's typical in our culture is nicknames. I mean, there's been several times that several people have passed away in my life, and I didn't really know what their real name was, their birth name. I was like, oh, I all I know is all I ever called him was Big Daddy or Big Mama or Knucklehead or something. So it's something that's
Right,
in our culture, and it's I I'm not saying, and there's nothing wrong with it.
right,
I would like for individuals, especially our younger, there's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't have to be. You can
right.
make your name if whatever you want it to be.
That's
And if you
right.
want to call, I remember when Muhammad Ali, he told the sports set, my name is, that's what you will call me by.
Yes,
We can determine who we want to be called. We don't have
that's
to
right.
let people name us and we go by it. Um,
Yes.
and
That
something
is
else,
exactly that's
go ahead.
exactly true. But also another reason for those code names is that
Mhm,
when I spoke to my relatives and they told them I was going to write this book, they
mhm.
asked me not to use their real name too. So that's partially why. But growing
Beautiful.
up in the Jim Crow South, yeah,
Mhm.
many of those names were actual real names. So
Well, I just want to tell you some of those that you put the name to, we kind of figured out who you were talking about. So if you didn't know, I mean, if you know you kind of figured out who he was talking about.
right.
Um, I have to say, what was your wife's opinion? I asked you the question about you writing this book and telling so much. What was her
Well, she understood because
Mhm,
we've been married for 37 years, and
mhm,
she understood all those years that we've been married that I had to do it. And one example, Cheryl, I mean, this might be shocking to some people, but I still would have nightmares, even
mm,
as a 55-year-old individual, where I would wake up in the middle of the night and she'd have to shake me and shake me out of a bad dream.
yes.
And the bad dream, one of the bad dreams I had was an incident where, as a child, I was being suffocated by a pillow.
Mm,
So and so she'd have to wake me out of that
mhm,
and actually anoint me and pray for me right there on the spot. So she understood my needing to overcome,
mhm,
and it was medicine. It's medicine that I had to have in order so that I can move on. So and she's visited my roots in the rural Jim Crow South, and she understands exactly how I grew up and what I had to overcome, especially since I have siblings who are not doing well right as of even today.
mhm. Well, also I like to say I think that you gave her kudos many times within this book.
Hmm.
And I was just curious what she thought about the book.
Hmm.
Um, and you said a real Black woman understands the problems that come with living in a nation so full of these beings. She knows that every now and then that her man needs a bump, and a James Brown grunt in order to make it. Good soul power. Papa don't take no mess. So now take your man to the bridge, but be careful not to hit him the wrong way. Brothers get a serious attitude when you hit them on the download instead on the one. And I think there you're saying just exactly what you said. She
Yes.
knows you, she knew you, she
Yes.
understood you. And to me, I think in that paragraph, you give her great kudos into being the woman that you just talked about Now. There another thing I'd like to bring up was you mentioned in there, and it's something, hopefully I got that page marked, that I have been saying time and time again, um, and I just said it recently in the show. You know, we had President Barack Obama, and everything was changed, supposedly changed. You see now on TV all these commercials that are mixed couples and children and everything getting on, but it's not really that. It hasn't really changed for the betterment. I think there's good and there's bad, but I agree that, it's not what they're trying to make it be, and we should open our eyes to see that it is not changed. We are still, and some days I feel like we're going backwards instead of forward. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so one of the tricks that I see that's going on is that you take the top 15%,
Mm-hmm.
the Barack Obamas and the Wendy Williams or the Dr. Thompsons, and you say, see, they made it. They've got a doctorate degree. They live in West Omaha. Okay, everything's okay. Well, what about the what about the other 85% of our folk? And so you can't just take a few, can't handpick a few people who have shown some progress and say that's the whole race.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of our race is still struggling.
Each and
We
every day.
black people have the highest divorce rate.
Yes.
Black people have the highest dropout rate
Mm-hmm.
if you don't count Native American.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can go on and on and on and on with statistics. And just because Dr. Thompson is doing well doesn't mean the black race is doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for one, will never forget that. I will never forget where I came from and those who I'm still reaching out to try and help.
Another early on in the book where you talk about it, you said, our children are not born mentally ill, neither are they innately endowed with the desire to take the lives of others and themselves. Violence is a learned behavior, and many times the behaviors of children are just a simple cry for help. But at what point do we stop labeling them as monsters and social misfits? At what point do we stop throwing rocks at our own creation? And I ask that because I am sure that you are aware and you've noticed there's been a lot in in the news, in the media, and so forth, particularly in Omaha, by the police department to label our young, and I'm referring to when I say our young black children, to be treated as adults and to blame them and to put them in the justice system unfairly. Um, and so this paragraph speaks to that. It,
Yes, it does. We create the dysfunction that we
yes.
see.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to act like we're innocent, that the system is innocent, and that the kids are guilty, that's totally that's bogus.
Mm-hmm.
That's bogus. Um, we've got to do a better job of helping these kids at an earlier age not take the negative route. Don't wait until they get in trouble and then slap them on the hand and call them, forever you're in the system, going to be in the system, and forever you're bad or at risk. At
Mm-hmm.
risk is something that's created. These kids did not come out of the womb wanting to be dysfunctional.
Correct. 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 Um, One thing I do want to go back before I go further is you did mention about tech, and I know that there are some who went to tech and graduated, and I will say like in the 1950s, 56, that was not the tech that ended up being the tech that you went to school at.
Yes,
At the time
yes.
that tech was back in those that I know who were graduated in 1956, before my time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Um, those are adults that I look up to who went to tech and graduated. You had the boozers and other sports and entertainers. They did go there because tech was one of the things where you could go and get an education for anything. If you didn't maybe want to go to college, or there were certain that were encouraged to go on to college, but if you didn't, you could get a good education and then you could get a skill. They had everything at Tech High School. So
That is
I
true.
want people to, I don't want to mislabel tech, but what you said is true. When you started going to tech, it had totally changed. It was the school for the misfits and looked down. I wonder,
May I comment on that real
sure.
quick?
Hmm.
The downfall corresponded with the murder of Vivian Strong.
Hmm.
1969, when Vivian Strong was murdered, we knew Vivian personally.
Hmm.
And when she got killed, then the school changed and the whole community changed,
Well,
in fact.
yes,
And
white
so
flight.
the tough years
Hmm.
were 69 through about 75.
Hmm.
Those were the tough years. The years at Tech before that were, it was actually a role model for education. There was a national ranking of what they call vocational schools, and
Correct.
Tech was considered the third best in the whole
Hmm.
United States, behind Chicago and San Diego. Then came Tech High in Omaha. So it had a double track. It had an academic track and a vocational track.
Right.
And but because of that unfortunate event, and also the unfortunate jailing of Poindexter and Rice,
Hmm.
then Tech became the center focus of very angry activism.
Hmm.
And so between 69 and 75, it took a different turn. Now, after 75, it got back on track. Principal Odra Bradley got it back on track, and then it closed in 1984.
And I will have to compliment you on one thing, because what I like is, and I like that you research and you know your history. And I
Yes,
love talking to people who now that, instead of, people make these statements and I'm like, you haven't done any research. You haven't done the history. You don't know what the history is. So
not a
I
lick of
commend
history.
you throughout your whole book, and any of the times that I've talked to you, I can say that you have researched and know your history on that. Um, One of the things I'd like to talk to, and is, again, it's in the book, um, when you mentioned University of Never Ending Opportunity, which was code name for UNO. What would you say? And you ended up teaching and everything at the kids I used to say to me, I ain't going to UNO. I'm like, why? No, that's no opportunity. So, what is your comments on making this public? Because people do say, and I just had an interview with Ajmal Biden and Dr. Patrick Valquez, and they talked about, and the sad thing, it goes back again, Dr. Thompson, we are still, that same things then is still now. UNO, when you look at, and you've been there, at the enrollment of black and brown, it's terrible, and it's very low, and it's the article in the paper that they wrote um says it, the numbers. And what I found when I interviewed them was uh the chancellor did not have the decency and the courtesy to respond to them himself. He had it done by a staff, she had it done by a staff member, which again says that insult is, you're there for the job, but what is changing for the black and the brown youth at trying to go in and for a higher education?
Okay, there's sort of two or three things there I can
Sure,
unpack.
I'll let you
First
know.
of all, when I was in high school, the
Mhm.
nickname for UNO was West Dodge West High School. You
Uh-huh.
know, it was even worse than the other. But then it changed to UNO, and but during the, I would say right around the 1987 period,
Uh-huh.
UNO launched out and really said, we want to become an institution of first choice. And
Uh-huh.
they went out, and one of the ways you do that is you get your doctoral programs up and running, and
Mhm.
then get your research funding going. And so the ranking of UNO has dramatically gone up. We rank even with schools like uh, Drake and Wichita State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at one time, that was unheard of. We were at the bottom.
Mhm.
So the leaders have done a better job, and that old University of No Opportunity, um, people our age, we remember that. But some of the younger kids now, you say that and they'll kind of have a quizzical look on their faces because it is, a much improved institution. The other thing that you brought up is, you know, the, the university has been um, extremely good to me, and I've seen them do some extremely good things for people of color. Does that not mean that they can do better? Yeah, they can do better. They can, and they need to do better. And so I too am not happy with our representation on campus.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I did when I was there was visit the schools. I would actually go to North High, go to Benson, Northwest, and actually recruit, in particular, recruit to become teachers, educators. So some of that has fallen off, and I'd like to see us return to that. I'm retired now, but I'm still open to be a part of the solution and not just complain. Um, we need to do a better job of recruiting, and not only academics, but I think we let some of our athletes get away too.
Mhm.
So I agree with you that we're not where we should be in terms of recruitment and retention.
Right.
Recruit, but once they get there, you got to retain them too,
Right.
of people of color.
What about the faculty and
I
staff?
receive what you're saying.
Yeah. What would you say that there needs to be more faculty and staff improvement?
Definitely. Recruitment is not just students. You
Mhm.
got to recruit the staff to be there too.
Mhm.
One of the reasons why I was recruited in the college was because there were only a couple of African American professors, and there were only three, and all three of them were female.
Mhm.
And so I happened to be in the halls taking classes, and I went in and introduced myself to the dean. And the dean says, "I'm glad you dropped in. We wanted to talk to you." And I said, "I thought I was in trouble." And I
Mhm.
said, "What did I do?" And he says, "This is nothing. I want to recruit you to become a professor here." I was shocked because I wasn't, you know, expecting that. So
Mhm.
there has been some leadership in the past that has gone out and tried to do that. It hasn't been a sustained effort.
Mhm.
One of the people who used to be very strong with that was John Langan, and
Mhm.
John Langan no longer. He's passed, you
Mhm.
know, and so it can't be relied on a personality. It's got to be an institutional commitment.
I think that's the best word right there is
Right,
institutional commitment, a
right.
commitment.
Not just one person who has a
Mhm.
vision. John Langan passes, and then all of a sudden, then that goal kind of languishes. Well, that's not an institutional commitment.
There are some other points in here, and I don't want to make this seem like a dark book. As far as I think it was a very truthful um, book, and I like the way you wrote the book. Um, but what would you say is the good things that came out of the bad things that happened to you? The poverty, the child abuse, the racism. What's the good things that you say came out that helped to make you be stronger individual that you are?
Excellent question, and I'm glad you're asking this because uh, we're struggling. When I say we, I'm talking about the educators that are my age. Uh, we're glad that we're able that the younger kids didn't have to go through what we have to go through,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's sometimes it seems like they're soft. So there's a kind of a balancing act. The Black struggle, although it was a struggle, and although it made us, tensed and angry and stressed, it also made us strong. And so today, I can just about survive anything because of what we went through
Mhm.
in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. It brought us together as a unit. I'm worried that the younger group now is so materialistic oriented that they don't appreciate that civil rights struggle. I had one student at Burke High School. He was Black, and I was teaching a Black history lessons, even though they didn't want me to. I did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But so I was always a Black history teacher, even when they thought I was causing problems. But a Black student stood up and said, "We don't want to hear that stuff. That stuff is old ancient history." And it shocked me to have a student say that, a Black student. So I guess what I'm saying is that uh, adversity, although it can grind you down, it can also instill in you toughness
Yes.
and an appreciation
Yes.
for um, your blessings. And everything can't be cotton candy and balloons floating in the sky. The Black race cannot survive on sugar.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have a foundation, and that foundation is laid uh, by people, uh, going to jail because of civil rights, being sprayed on with a fire hose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that stuff is uncomfortable, but it made us who we are. Black people are the most resilient people on the planet.
I've said that
And
many times. I
I
really
believe,
have.
this may sound a little bit, ethnocentric, but I believe in God, and I believe Black people are God's favorite,
Mhm.
even more than so-called other ethnic groups I
I
could mention.
understand where you're coming from. I got it. Um, and I've often said along those lines that we are survivors.
Yeah,
And not to say the survivors, just there's a word about survivors that can be taken in two different ways. But we are the strong, I feel like. I had always said when I was younger, and for those who know me, I am rather tall. I'm 5'11" and a half. And for a woman, that's, kind of. And before I was in corporate world, it was always looked upon, well, here's this Black woman. And for those who know me, I am very knowledgeable on whatever my challenge is or my job, I know it. And so I was often accused, well, Cheryl, you intimidate in, and I'm like, okay, are you through now? And I'm like, um, if my height, if my Blackness, if my womanness intimidates, that's not my problem. That's your problem. So you figure out how you get those individuals to be less intimidated, because I'm not changing. I'm not going to stoop. I'm not going to take away and be, well, I embarrassed by, no, I am who I am. And I'm thankful because I felt like I was made to be, I was born to be. And then I had strong, strong individuals around me because I believed in the older, I always like to be around the older people. They had such wisdom and what they were installed. But the problem I have, Dr. Thompson, is all that we've gone through, you and me and others in that age, is we look where we're at and why. And I think this is what they're doing to our young people, is making them think that these things didn't happen. The struggles didn't happen. The slavery, as DeSantis is doing, they're wiping it away. And what can be done to stop this is that we need to be, and I've said we need within our own homes, and I am very proud of our children, is that they teach their children to remember who you are and where you came from and what, future. Don't hold back. Um, I think that is the problem, which is, as you said, maybe our young people are so material. Yes, they are, but isn't that part of the strategy to keep us down? Is
that's part of that trick that I keep talking
the
about.
trick is
you
that
know,
trick asked, make sure people will get it. We said ASK,
ASK.
ideology. You're right. I never looked at, but that is,
Yeah.
it is. It's
Um,
part of it.
when desegregation happened, and it was an interesting history here how it happened in Omaha, And by the way, Tech High was the main case that the federal judge used to desegregate Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
But um, we, those of us who are at my age group educated, we were 50-50 because we liked the fact that there were mostly black schools.
Mm-hmm.
There was a positive to that. That wasn't all
Right.
negative. It
Correct.
was the separate but equal. It wasn't equal.
That's
But
right.
but if you could have black schools and it be equal, some of us prefer that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way we can then keep that struggle and that awareness going. But as soon as our kids went out west and became materialistic and
Yeah.
you know uh, a material girl living in a material world, Madonna
Mm-hmm.
mentality, then I saw the writing on the hand wall on the wall. Um, by the 80s, I saw it.
Well,
And
some
so,
people though, excuse me, I didn't enter, but some people could say, but Dr. Thompson, you moved out west.
yes, I did. And but my activity and my livelihood is in North Omaha. I attend church in North Omaha. I'm on the council that does things for North Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I had a son. My wife had a son from a previous marriage, and he was getting in trouble with a bad group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt that to save him, we had to remove him from that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And today he is a very solid citizen and a great coach, but we had to remove him from a certain neighborhood, or else he was not going to end up very good at all.
And you know,
And you know what?
go ahead.
And you know what? Uh, I'm really in Central Omaha. I'm,
Mm-hmm.
right over by Nebraska Furniture Mart, and give it another 10 years, and that'll mostly be black anyway. So,
Yeah. You were ahead of your time.
yeah.
But you know, I've often said you do not, I think that everybody should have the right to move and live wherever they want to. Just because you move somewhere does not mean you have to lose your identity, does
Right.
not have to lose the values of those area. There's so much I want to talk to you about, so I don't want to get of time, but there was also, you know, that you've been taken because you were a Republican. And I like two things. One was the comment that William King wrote. There is a belief that all Black conservative thinkers have nothing to offer to the general discourse on critical thinking, race relations, poverty, and the condition of Black lives in America. And this is what he wrote about your book. And this manuscript blows that myth and other related false assumptions clear out of the water. And folks, that was William King, the boss. And then you also made a comment in there. Church Mouse was a social reformer who believed that the views of Black conservative leaders like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Booker T. Washington, Jackie Robinson has relevance for today's world. So, you know, what would you like to say or comment on that particular being a Black conservative? Being Black conservative doesn't mean that you have to be Republican or really Democrat. It's what your
Yeah.
conservative value, because there's conservative Democrats too, if you want to think of party wise. But what would you want to say to our audience?
Uh, I have nothing to do with the idiots on the far right side. Okay. I am not a Donald Trumper, and but I am a conservative. I'm a Jackie Robinson
Yes.
conservative, and Jackie Robinson was a Republican. So
Hmm.
for me, the R behind my name, it doesn't mean that I'm in league with some of the stuff you see on TV.
Hmm.
But it does mean that I believe that our original Black culture in America was a combination of conservative, moderate, and liberal. And I believe that when we throw all of our eggs in one basket, just
Hmm.
liberal, then I believe we can be taken advantage of. I really do. So I purposely am not a Democrat. I do that on purpose, even though sometimes I vote for Democrats. I
Right.
voted for Obama. Okay.
Hmm.
I vote for a Democrat, even though R is behind my name, but I keep the R behind my name because somebody has got to stand out and let our kids know Black people have options. Okay. And so if that means I have to take criticism for that R, give me the criticism, but I'm still doing what our kids need. The kids need to see that there are options. We have to have a little bit of liberal, a little bit of moderate, a little bit of conservative, because that's our history. That is Black history.
And I think it comes back to my point that I often say is you don't have to be a Democrat, you don't have to be a Republican, but what you need to be is an informed voter. And
Right.
that's where we have lost, that we have decided that if we're a Republican, we have to vote this way. If we're a Democrat, you have to vote. No, what you need to know is to understand the policies, their philosophy, and those things. And if they meet what you think, then that's who you vote for. Become informed. But there again, that takes an effort to be informed about.
Right.
Sometimes when I hear Republicans, um, again, I definitely not on that far right. That's out. But there are some good points. Now, I fought them
Yes.
right now because they're not standing up for the true
Yeah.
conservative meaning. But I think if we could teach people to understand, become informed of the policies of the individual you want to vote for. Don't throw everything out. Look at the situation. Is if you only have a choice between the two, which is the better for you? And then if you vote, we need to make them more accountable, which we haven't done. Um, so I'll speak. I'm getting close to my
Ever
time. Go ahead.
ever since I've been voting, when I was a Democrat, I voted this way. When I was a Republican, I voted this way.
Mhm,
I've never voted straight party ticket. Never.
mhm.
I've always voted for the person. In every vote I've ever done, I've voted for some R's and some D's, and I continue to do that today. That is not only critical thinking, that's wise for Black folks.
Exactly. And that's what I think people need to look at. There was one other thing that I wanted to get. I liked how you, at the end of the various chapters, how you would give the tips. So
Yes.
I was wondering, was your book sent to any of the educators around? Was it sent to the um, Nebraska, the state educators or national educators, this book, because I think those things that you have, those post chapter mentorings and survival tips are very important. So I was just wondering, did you do that or have you thought about doing that or
I'm
contact?
glad I'm glad you're mentioning it because it gives me another job to do. I think I do need to reach out to
Yeah,
those places. The College of Education at
yes.
UNO embraced the book, but
Mhm.
there are other entities like you were just saying that need to read this stuff
And I
because
would,
one of the messages in there, the one of the main messages, Cheryl, is that when the parents fail you and the government fails you and the church fails you, I wish I didn't have to say that, teachers can still make a positive difference.
if they're
One
allowed to
one
teach.
teacher, one teacher can get into the life of a hurting child, and boom, that kid's life will be changed forever.
But the way that they are destroying the teachers' um, ability to teach now,
Oh yeah.
there are things that I would never be a teacher because I couldn't tolerate it.
Mhm.
But I think when we have taken away teachers to what they're supposed to teach
Yeah.
versus what I can speak for myself of, I had that strong foundation built at home. And that's where we're lacking. And
Mhm.
perhaps if there was more that we need to go back into the home and help those striving parents, help those individuals who are wanting a better life for their child. But when you have, and I'll use it as an example, you have a governor who says, well, I don't want this to become a welfare state, but you can accept welfare for your business, your pig farms, you can accept PP money. So that's welfare. It's just who's getting the welfare. So I'm saying that is when we don't come as a community, as individuals, as citizens, and fight for things that are going to be better for the children, all children, whether it's yours personally or what, but just to have like student lunch. Like you said, when you went to school, you can understand that. When you were hungry, could you concentrate? It was very hard. By the time you had gotten out and emancipated yourself, look at what you were still. And it was hard because you had all those things that you had to try to
Yes.
take care of and to
Yes.
teach. And then so now when I say teachers, teachers aren't to raise our kids, but they can assist our kids to help.
Yes.
And I remember one that was great for me and one that was bad. I remember my geometry. I loved math, but I got a poor teacher at Central High School in math that if I hadn't had been strong in my own self, could have ruined me in going farther. But then I had
Yes.
another teacher in science who encouraged and was saying you can do anything. I didn't want to become a scientist, but it wasn't because he didn't encourage. And I remember him now to this day, Mr. Snyder. And when you, like you said, when you have those one teachers who make a difference, you remember them.
Mhm.
Um,
I
and
had
I
a
want to
teacher
get,
that
go
I had
ahead.
a teacher that took away a scholarship.
I can believe it.
The editor of the Lincoln Journal Star was going to give me a scholarship. She called him and said, "Take the scholarship away from Franklin Thompson because he's becoming too much like Malcolm X."
I
And,
can believe that
and the
happened.
scholarship was pulled.
I can believe that happened because I've seen that. And I heard from a young man who I think he was probably would have been the 80s or so, is that he was told, I'm not going to have you graduate from this school as a black man. You're not doing that. And they can stop it. So that's when I say you can have a good and you can have a bad. A teacher can have a
Right.
bad influence or a good influence. I'm almost out of time, but folks, you got to get this book. And as he said, it was on Amazon.com. You can go and get Confessions of a Murphy's Law Child. And because I don't want to tell it all, I hope that I've given people enough to encourage them to want to get this book to see what you said. And if I've got enough time, one more quick question is politics. How did you get
Yes.
into the politics of running
What?
for a city council?
How did I get into it?
Hmm.
A student challenged me to. I had been working miracles with turning West Omaha kids around.
Uh-huh.
So for some of them, I was their first and only Black teacher ever,
Uh-huh.
or these kids from Ainsworth, Iowa, or someplace like that. And so I made such an impression on them. They said, "Well, more people have to hear what you have to say,
Hmm.
other than the 30 people in these four walls.
Hmm.
Why don't you run for politics?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I can do that because the political game is a kind of a rough and tumble game." So I heard that for about 10 years. And then one time a student said it again. And I said, "Well, would you help me?"
Hmm.
And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Really?" And so his student and his girlfriend, which now they're married,
Uh-huh.
uh, became my campaign director on a whim, on a dare.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody thought I would win because it was a West Omaha district.
Right.
And even my boss said I wouldn't win,
Uh-huh.
not because I wasn't qualified, but because he said that, West Omaha was too racist.
Uh-huh.
But I had a secret weapon, and that was that after teaching in West Omaha for 20 years, a lot of those parents knew me
Uh-huh.
and they knew me. And so I rode that secret weapon into a victory.
And you kept writing it because I will say from my point of view, one thing, like I said, I never agreed with everything you voted on in the city council, and I didn't disagree with them. But the one thing I've always, and I believe I told you this personally, is that the one thing I had respect for was in your district, people knew you. They could come to you. They could call you. You would
Mhm.
go back. You went attended meetings. You were there for them. Now, you didn't always vote exactly the way they wanted to, but I gave you and I respected you, which isn't, I can't say the same for some of the city council members we have on there now, but you did go and listen to many of those association meetings, you practically all of them. Anybody that I talked to said, "Oh yeah, Franklin's always here. He attends the meetings or this or that." And I think that's what made the difference because you served 12 years.
16
That's
years.
not in how many?
16.
16. I'm off a term.
Four terms. Four
Four
terms.
terms.
Hmm.
Okay. I know you're right. Four terms.
Hmm.
Um, and from being in West Omaha, it made a difference. And you were also grassroots, whether they liked those grassroots or disliked, they liked what you were doing your lunches.
It was always a balancing act, Cheryl,
Mhm.
between because I'd have some people that says always vote for what's right, and then other people say, well, vote for what your citizens want.
Yeah.
And it's a big question as to when you're elected, do you represent the people and what they want, or do you push them to learn something new? And I always had to balance between both of them. And I did. Sometimes I voted for what they wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I voted for things that they needed to learn, even though they were mad at me for doing it. Okay. So it was a balancing act, which means that there's always going to be somebody that's not going to like everything you did.
I just said
But
that.
I think overall, I made an impression
Mhm.
in West Omaha that wow, there's more to this Black thing than we thought. I think
Mhm.
I really made a deep impression of opening up the minds of West Omaha citizens.
And I think you did it not only to say as a Black person, but as an individual and humanity. You see, it's not about always race. We need to get back. We're humans. It's humanity. And I
Mhm.
think you came across that way. So where are we at on part two, part three?
Part two is being written right now, but I may have to put part two on hold because
Okay.
I have another book that's more important.
Okay.
The name of the book is called Shift Happens, SHIFT. And sometimes if you want to make the F silent, then it has another meaning. But um, that one is very important because it talks about the games that I saw as a politician. I'm going to actually reveal the Democrat games that I saw and the Republican games that I saw, the white games I saw, and the Black games I saw. And that is more important right now than my personal story.
Okay.
But I will have a three-part to my personal story. And then I have this one uh, instructive one where I want everybody to understand that there's more than what we're doing. We have to do a lot more than what we are doing, and that's so important that I'm pushing that one in front right now.
And what was the name of it again?
Shift happens.
Okay.
Some
So
people will
I
some people
understand.
drop the F.
When do you expect for this to come out?
Maybe I'd say by next year this time.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it will make people a little angry because I'm going to tell.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna expose some things that actually took place. A good example would be one Republican wanted me to take my picture off my literature
Uh-huh.
because quote unquote white men in West Omaha don't want Black men who marry white women.
Uh-huh.
Well, you know Beverly, and you know Beverly's a light-skinned Black female.
Yeah.
Take away her lightness, and she's more Black than most Black people. Let me tell you, Beverly is a sister girl, okay?
Yes. I've
But
met
on
her
a black,
before.
but on a black and white picture,
Mhm.
she could pass for
Right.
looking white.
Yes.
And so I'm going to tell on that guy that tried to get me to take my
Uh-huh.
picture off because so quote unquote was in an interracial marriage. Ridiculous things like that. So
Well, I'm going to be looking forward to that. And one of the incidents that I remember happening when uh you were on the city council and they had the changing of districting.
mhm.
And I remember that incident. I'm not going to I'm gonna let that be. Hopefully that'll be in your book too, to explain how that went down and came.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one like that's a true picture of Omaha. But is there anything you'd like to say or your closing remarks? Again, I just want to stress and I'm not here to try to sell the book for the purpose of selling. I think the book has a lot to say, not only about the individual, but it also has a lot to say what is happening to, and I go back to our children now, and this false trick ask ideology. And I think that's important. So that's the reason why I'm pushing it. And it's very easy to read. Again, I went through it and I was like, whoa, I didn't know all this. Um, and you give your, I felt like it was an honest view, and I could see why you had family members and colleagues and probably politicians that did not want you to write this. But I think that's one of the things that stands out, and it's important for, particularly for young Black men who have gone through some of these things yourself, um, is not to let that hold you back. When they tell you you can't, you show them that I am, and I will.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I
I'd like
came
to
away with
mention
that.
my,
I
thank you.
hope.
Thank you very much. I'd like to mention my website. Again, that's
Okay,
omahachangeagent.com, omahachangeagent.com. And when you go to that site, you'll also not only see the book, but music that corresponds to the messages in the book.
great. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the book coming out, and also open up the program to you. If give me a call and there's something you want to get on the show about, you're always a welcome guest to be on my show.
And I'm
Again,
always
thank you so
available.
much.
I'm
Thank
always available to you. I believe in what you do.
I appreciate that.
I'm a Cheryl Western fan, and you can always count on me if you need me to be involved with something.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I've enjoyed this so much, and I'm sure the audience will too. And we will have at the end of my program, once we get this edited, we will have your website up for people to be able to go to, and the book, and then they can get this from Amazon. And I'm not sure, is there anywhere else you can acquire the book from, or can they
Yes,
contact you directly, or
you can go to Bookworm, which is
Bookworm?
on 90th
Okay,
Street.
all right.
90th, just north of Center.
Okay, great. We've got that down. Um, I'm also going to contact a friend of mine who has a bookshop over in Bellevue, and
They can
what's it?
also get it from the Afro American bookstore on 33rd and Lake.
It is out there at the African. Okay, because I
Yes.
really try to steer my and these two bookstores. In fact, I don't know if you know, we now have three African bookstores in Omaha. One in Bellevue, and then one in Benson, and then the African American bookstore. So I will definitely put that at the end of the program.
And would you send me via text those other two stores?
I sure will. I will
I
get that
appreciate it.
information to you. Yeah, because I
Okay.
think I'd probably love to carry it. All right, great. Thanks again, and look
Thank
forward
you.
to our next show. And folks, uh, you need to tune in to Conversations with Cheryl Weston, and because I have the guests that no one else has. So, Conversations with Cheryl Weston, be sure to subscribe to it. And again, we appreciate have a great day.